Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Tezayin Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom, from the 2 dots. The Gemara continues to show us the Shmona Asar Dovar that were goizer on that day, where Beis Shammai overvoted that opinion of Beis Hillel. Says the Gemara, V'idach Maihi, and the other one, what is it? What's included in these 18 Gzeros? Disnan. The Gemara brings a Mishnah from Oyhalois. Kol hametaltlin mevin es hatuma. All those that are movable objects bring tuma ba'oivei ha-mardeya, in the thickness of a mardeya, which is less than a tefach. A mardeya is a stick that has a spade at the end, which was used in order to then move animals. And therefore, this stick that is less than a tefach, according to this opinion, causes an oil hames. Midi araisa, you must have a full tefach to make an oil, to be a roof over a mace, whereby everything underneath it will then become tameh and avatuma for 7 days, requiring the mechatas on Yom Shlishi and Yom Shavi, on the 3rd and the 7th day. So over here, this opinion says even when it's not a tefach, the Rabbanan said there's still an oil hames. Rabbi Tarfon says, Akapeach es beni shezu halacha mekupachas. Rabbi Tarfon was very upset and said that a certain curse upon himself, that my son should be buried, should be cut down with this halacha, which is also halacha which is cut down. In other words, this halacha is mishubeshes. It's an incorrect halacha. Sheshama hashomeya. The person in the Beis Medrash heard that they were metameh, that they made a gzeir of tuma. V'to, however, he made a mistake. Ha'ikar oiver umardoi al keseifoy. The farmer who was walking beside a kever, holding on to this mardeya on his shoulder. V'iyalot sidoi achas al hakever, and the mardeya went over the kever. Timu oisoi mishum kelim hamalim alames. They said, he thought that they meant, this Shomei in the Beis HaMedrash, that this mardeya which went over the mace causes a oil hames, and thereby everything beneath it, including the person carrying it, has a din of tumas avatuma for 7 days. And Rabbi Tarfon said that's incorrect. He misunderstood the halacha. Because indeed, when the mardeya which goes over the mace, that becomes an avatuma, and the one who is holding it on his shoulders, he becomes a rishon letuma, and therefore at the end of the day he becomes tahor. But not for 7 days is he tameh. It doesn't become an oil hames. Omar Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, Ani etaken sheyu divrei chacham kayomim. I can explain the words of this Tana that they should be lasting. I agree with you, Rabbi Tarfon, that indeed something that is less than a tefach does not make an oil hames. That for sure. However, the fact that the person who is carrying it, since he is indeed carrying it, I can explain how he does become tameh for 7 days, but for a different reason. Explains Rabbi Akiva. All of the movable objects bring about tuma al ha'odam shenoisei oisim ba'ove hamardeya, on the one who is carrying them, in this case the farmer, who carries the mardeya on his shoulders. Why? Because although it's true, mi'ikar hadin min hatara, he's only going to be a rishon letuma, but because if he was a rishon letuma alone, he might think that the reason why he is tameh is because it's an oil hames, meaning to say that since over here it might not have a thickness of a tefach, but it has a circumference of a tefach, the mardeya, and therefore it causes an oil hames, whereby he'll say that somebody who was inside of an oil hames is only going to be tameh for 1 day. That's why at the end of the day I become tahor. So therefore, as not to then erroneously think that a person underneath an oil hames is only tameh for 1 day, but the truth is he's really tamei for 7 days, the Chacham were goizer upon the one who is carrying it a tuma for 7 days. And therefore the words of the Tana is kayomim. Again, not for the reason that it's because it provides an ol hames. Like Rabbi Tarfon said, that's impossible. So Rabbi Akiva agrees with that. But he does say that the person who's carrying, in this case the farmer, will become tamei not as a rishon, but as somebody who has an av hatuma for 7 days. Rabbi Akiva goes on to explain, Va'al atzmon b'kol shehein, and on themselves, meaning the mardeya will become an av hatuma, because it doesn't require any thickness of a tefach. Va'al shar odam v'kelim b'foteach tefach. However, the odam and the kelim are underneath the oil, unless it's a tefach, the roof is a tefach, then they will not become tamei whatsoever. Rabbi Yonai explains that the mardeya that they were talking about, as we said before, its thickness, its width is not a tefach. V'yesh behekefo tefach, but its circumference is a full tefach. V'gazu al hekefa mishum avyoy, and they made a gezeira, the chachamim, of the circumference being a tefach because of the width of a tefach. And therefore they said that a person would perhaps make such a mistake by an ol hames if it's a circumference of a tefach. Certainly if it was less than a circumference of a tefach, and it wasn't certainly a width of a tefach, then there wouldn't be a gzer whatsoever. We wouldn't be concerned about a person making such a mistake. But if a person is holding on to the mardeya in this case, and it has a circumference of a tefach, then we're goizer, according to this Tana, of a av hatuma on the one who was holding it. Ask the Gemara, Rabbi Tarfon, the Omar akapeach es benisha halacha zu mikupachas. According to Rabbi Tarfon, who says that this halacha is a halacha that is mishubeshes, and therefore he didn't accept such a halacha. Batsru lehu, then he's missing one of the 18 enactments, one of the shmonasar dvarim. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok, af benois kutim nidois ma'arisason boy bayom gazru. Like we learned before, that Rabbi Tarfon ascribes to this opinion that the benois kutim, because the kutim were not careful with the laws of nida for a child, and therefore they didn't make her into a nida. The chacham were goizer on a bas kuti from day one that she has the din of a nida. And therefore that would be one of the 18 enactments according to Rabbi Tarfon. The idach, ubeidach svirulek Rabbi Meir. And in the other one, he holds like Rabbi Meir, like we saw last time, that Rabbi Shammai says if you put a kli underneath the tzinor that is leading into the mikvah, if it's not yet 40 saw, and the rainwater falls into this kli that is underneath the tzinor, Bein beniach, bein shoicheach. Beis Shammai is of the opinion that that water that gathers into that kli is mayim she'uvim, will buy, if it's shloisha lugim mayim she'uvim, will be poisel that mikvah. Says the Gemara to continue counting the shmonasar dvarim. The idoch, and another one, haboitzer legas, one who harvested grapes for the wine press. Shammai oimer huchshar. Hillel omer lo huchshar. Shammai says that those grapes that they might exude some of their juice will cause those grapes to become huchshar, susceptible to tuma. And Hillel argues, because Hillel says, after all, since a person doesn't want some of the juice coming out of the grapes, because then it'll just get lost, it'll get ruined, it'll go to waste. Certainly that's not going to then be machshir the grapes, because in order to be machshir peiros, it has to be that the owner wants that juice or that liquid be something that he desires to be out. And here we're not desire for the liquid of the grapes to have exuded from the grapes, because they'll get lost and get ruined and go lost. Amar le'Hillel l'Shammai mibnei ma boitzrin b'taro ve'in moiskin b'taro. Ask Hillel l'Shammai, why are you only making a gezerah on the harvesting of grapes, making them that they're huchshar, and therefore those who are going to then harvest them must harvest them b'tahara. Why don't you do the same thing when it comes to then harvesting olives? That it must be that they harvest in things that are b'tahara. For the same reason. Omar le, Shammai turns back to Hillel and he says, Im takniteni, if you agitate me further, gozreni tuma, af ala mesika, I will indeed goizer on the harvesting even of olives. In other words, if you don't understand the distinction between the two things, then I'll also be goizer on the harvesting of olives, for others will also not make the distinction. Natsu chereb beis hamedrish, amru hanichnas yikanis v'ayotzei al yetzei. They put a sword into the ground, and they declared anybody who will enter shall enter, that anybody who wants to leave cannot leave. Because since they want to make a vote, they would put this statement by putting the sword into the ground, saying that nobody can leave. On that day, Hillel HaZaken was submissive before Shammai HaZaken, like a student of one of Shammai's students. It was difficult for Yisrael as the day that they made the Egel Hazav, because Hillel, in his humility, had to stand submissive before Shammai. Al Kapanim, it says, V'gazer Shammai v'Hillel, that Shammai and Hillel decreed, V'lo kiblu minayu, but the people didn't accept it. V'osu talmidaihu gazur v'kiblu minayu. Subsequently, the Talmidim of Shammai and Hillel were gozer this gzeira, and it was accepted. Ask the Gemara, my time, what is the ultimate reason for this gzeira in the first place? After all, we said that if a liquid is not biratzon of the owner, that doesn't want that liquid to then fall on the payros, and then it will not be machshir those payros. Says the Gemara to explain the various reasons. Omar Zi'iri, Omar Rabbi Chanina, Gezeira Shema Yibatzreno Bekupois Tmeos. Perhaps they will harvest these grapes and put them in boxes that are tamei. And therefore, since the boxes themselves are tamei, when they come in contact with this liquid, with the juice of the grapes, it'll directly metame that liquid, which will then metame the grapes, will machshir the grapes, and metame them. So Gemara says, Hanicha lemanda omer kli tamei choyshev mashkin shapir. That's good according to the opinion that says that a kli that is tamei then causes indeed, has chashivus to then cause the mashkin to become tamei. El lemanda omer ein kli tamei choyshev mashkin. But according to the other opinion that says that kli tamei does not cause the liquids to become tamei, then what are you going to say? It doesn't have the chashivus, it doesn't have the significance. So what are you going to say? What is going to be the reason for this gzeira? Elam Rab Ziri, Omar Rabbi Chanina, gzeira shema yibatzreno bekupois mizupafois. The gzeira is for those who will harvest in boxes that are waterproof. And then, since they're sealed, a person who harvests the grapes doesn't mind that there are some juice that then exudes from these grapes, because they won't get lost. They'll be used ultimately because they're going to sit in this box that is waterproofed, and therefore he's happy with any exuding, any liquid that comes out from these grapes. Rav Amar Gezeira Mishum HaNoishchos. Rav has a different reason. He explains it was a Gezeira because of noishchos. Noishchos is when you have the grapes that are clusters of grapes that are stuck together. So because when you harvest it, you'll try to then pull the grapes from one another, inevitably the grapes will be squeezed and then juice will come out, then going on to the grapes and be machshir the grapes. Rav Nachman Amar Rabbe Baravua Pe'omi she'odam holech lekarmoi leida im higiyoi anovim lebitzira or loy. Sometimes a person might go to his vineyard to check whether it's time to harvest the grapes or not. V'noitel eshkol anovim lesoichetoi umezalef al gabe anovim, and he'll take a cluster of grapes and he'll then squeeze some of those grapes to determine whether they're ripe enough to then be harvested, and some of that juice will then sprinkle onto the grapes. And the Gemara adds, Ubishas bitzira adayin mashke toifeach aleim. And at the time of the harvesting, that means once they were detached from the vines, they were still wet, whereby they're machshir the grapes to become susceptible to tumah. Because while they're still on the vines, so they cannot become susceptible to tumah. It's only once they're detached from the ground.